thank you, everybody, and anyone who's listening to this recording. Delighted to have your attention here for a few moments, and hopefully what you'll hear in our discussion is going to be captivating, and you will not even do any multitasking. So again, so eyeballs with us today. What I'm going to do is go ahead and share my screen, and we'll talk a little bit about our discussion that we're going to have today. So, and welcome everyone. So the topic at hand here is avoiding founder regret. And what we'd like to do is bring you into the depths of entrepreneurial candidness and 2020 hindsight like never before. And I'll share a little bit about me. Ellen will have you introduce yourself, and then we'll crack on, as they say in the UK. My name is Marilyn Pearson Hendricks. My friends call me MPH. I am the co-founder of WorkTech Advisory, and we are a global consultancy. We work with founders and the senior leadership teams to really unpack the value of the offering that our clients are bringing to market. And part of our value, I think, in terms of the insight and the approach and the methodology that we use, is the fact that we've been in the industry a long time, and we've got battle scars and hatchet marks, and we've made lots and lots of mistakes in our past. And so our goal of our engagements is to help others not have to go through the same gyrations as well, to the same degree. So I've dedicated my career to really helping unlock innovative people processes. And so it's really at the intersection of work and technology and people, and how can we really do better in our business environments by making that happen. And in spite of all of the innovation and change that has happened in our careers, there's still a long way to go. And it's really been fascinating to be part of that journey. I had the good fortune to earlier this year meet Alan. Alan, I think we met at the Ice Bar.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we met at the Ice Bar. Shout out to Mike at Aaron.
Yeah, Mike at Aaron, if you're listening, we'll definitely have him put this on his reading list. But Ellen and I met, and we started working together, and hence this led to the synthesis of our backgrounds together, and the desire to share some pieces of advice today. So, Ellen, if you wouldn't mind going ahead and taking the stage here.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I am with Fairmount Partners. We're investment bankers. We do the vast majority of what we do is sell side M&A. So we are representing sellers in M&A transactions. We do some buy side M&A as well, typically for much larger companies on a pretty strategic basis. And we do a lot more buy side than I ever did at Stifel or Legg Mason. And it's sort of interesting that it really just builds out the fact that we've got a lot of expertise in the market and run across a lot of really interesting emerging growth companies. So, excuse me, Fairmount Partners, we're based outside of Philadelphia. Within the technology practice, which is where I'm a member, we spend a lot of time really understanding what drives growth and what drives value in emerging growth technology companies, right? So it's what levers that you can pull in order to create a great exit. And it might be net retention, it might be gross margins, it might be unit economics, it might be growth rate, profitability. But really, what are the key drivers of value for companies that are emerging growth technology companies? We apply that to our clients, again, mostly on the sell side, so that we can begin working with them a year, if not more, in advance of an exit, so that you can make the changes to drive value along the way, and not we get involved and you're ready to go to market and it's like, hey, you got a problem with your TAM. So we try and get involved early so that we can divert a river while it's still a stream. One of the areas that we focus on is HR technology, and it's an area that I really love. There's a ton of innovation going on. It's a really interesting community. And as a senior investment banker, I live the problem every day in terms of how do we motivate our junior people? How do we retain them? How do we engage with folks that may be remote? How do we hire? So it's an area that's sort of near and dear to my heart. So what we're going to be talking about today are some lessons that we've learned along the way. I think Marilyn and I independently about how to prepare yourself for a sale. And really, it's just good hygiene and a lot of things that you should be doing anyways. Even if you're not preparing yourself for a sale, you may be preparing yourself to raise equity, or just growth in general. So with that, Marilyn, we present to you the 10 commandments of planning an exit. All right. So commandment number 1. I don't know if I'm aging myself a little bit with some of these slides. I'm going to just say that right now. But the first one, if you remember Stuart Smiley from Saturday Night Live, the first commandment is to thine own self be true. And what we mean by this is be able to articulate what makes your business unique, right? What's your competitive differentiators? What from a culture perspective, from a value creation, a unique value proposition, be able to understand and articulate what makes you different, because when you're thinking about selling or you're thinking about raising money, there's a lot of companies that may look like you. And so understanding what makes you different and being able to articulate that is super important.
Do you see, Ellen, a lot of earlier stage organizations struggle with this?
Well, I do. I mean, so when you think about just talent acquisition or talent engagement or social hiring, they people put themselves into buckets, right? And when you put yourself into a bucket, it's good to do, because you want to be able to explain to somebody really fast, hey, here's what we do and here's the area that we play in. Right, that's great. But being able to articulate what makes the company unique is really, really important, because an investor is looking, just from the investor perspective, they're looking at hundreds of opportunities a week, right? And how are you going to cut through the noise and show that you're differentiated, right? Strategic buyers in particular, may be doing the same thing, right? They know that they've got a hole they've got a product hole, or they've got a service area hole, or there's a segment of customers that they want to get access to, or technology. Why would they be interested in you over another particular group? So just really understanding your unique value proposition is important.
Right. I mean, we see people really struggling with this a lot, and really don't have the context as to how they fit into the ecosystem, and the language that can be used to tell the story, and how powerful that is. And so I love this. That actually relates to commandment number 2, doesn't it?
It does indeed.
Which is?
All right, commandment number 2, erect thou a moat deep and wide. So
say more about that.
Yeah, so when we talk about your moat, and I think most people have heard this terms, we're really talking about what protects your business from the competition. And the way that we like to think about it is, are you 2 or more years ahead of your competition, right? And your moat is the unique aspects of your business that put you 2 or more years ahead. It may be your unique intellectual property. It may be the fact that you've got a first mover advantage. It may be the fact that you've locked down some of the key buyers in the space, right? So your moat can be a lot of things, but really it's what protects you from the competition, the way that the moat used to protect the castle. The other thing that we think about your moat is, so you've got a 2-year lead today. What is your roadmap that supports and extends that lead, right? What are you thinking about adding in terms of your product set, in terms of functionality, right? That's going to keep you 2 years ahead of the competition. Because remember, in emerging growth technology, a lot of times you're competing with very well capitalized businesses who are going to just throw money at a problem. So you need to always be thinking about developing a very well articulated roadmap, being able to present that, logically and coherently to investors or buyers so that they understand that this is a business that's protected from competition today and it will be protected from competition in the future. And here's how they plan to go about doing that.
It's let me bounce something off of you that I think in the same place that we ended up meeting or same event at Unleash earlier this year. I was talking to an investor, serial entrepreneur, and he was looking out at the show floor for all of the vendors. And he basically said, with generative, all of the, if you would, and I'll use the word moat, the unique differentiator here, it's all been wiped and reset. And so I started thinking about that, and maybe where tech in the past had been the moat, it seems like it's shifting to people and relationships and in keeping with HR tech alliances, partnerships.
Yeah, that is for sure. It is definitely a component of it, right? It's so technology is important. It's the foundation. And generative can do a lot, but if you've got unique capabilities on the technology side, they still, a competitor still needs to be able to replicate your capability set, your skill set, your unique domain knowledge,
Right.
right? So generative AI cannot, it does a lot of things, but if your organization has unique domain knowledge, that's hard to replicate. So I agree with you, Marilyn, that your people, culture, um, uh, uh, who your client base is, the unique problem that you solve is all important, and it's all part of it, not
Right.
just tech.
Yeah, it's
More lines of code than the next guy. That's not it. More than
all right, build thy moat.
yes.
Know what a moat is. All right, let's go to commandment number 3.
All right. Commandment
Give
number
us the
3.
context here for anyone who's not familiar with.
Man, if you're not familiar with Game of Thrones, I don't know.
Yeah,
But at any rate, all right. So commandment number 3: position thee against the sinner. And so this is really it's consistent with understanding your value proposition, and it's very similar to commandment number 1, but it's understanding who you compete with. It's understanding what your value prop is, understanding your competitive positioning. So know who your competitors are, know how you stack up against them, and lastly, know why and how you win. When you win, why do you win? Why did you beat this competitor? Why did you beat that competitor? When you lose, why did you lose to this competitor? Why did you lose to that competitor? Understanding that is really key to getting a sense for how buyers and investors are going to be looking at you. You really need to understand where specific you stack up and what those key points are that position you better than whoever your competition is. And now, in the sell side, we'll use some tricks, and we'll say, okay, well, first of all, you got to understand what are the key things that people are buying, right? What are the rationale for buying of a particular solution, right? And when you understand that, we'll do a trick to say, okay, well, these are the areas that we're smart, we're really good at, and so these are the most important things. It's not always true, but that's a little trick we do. But it's really important to understand how you stack up against the folks you're competing against.
right. When you're looking at this and you're doing your research on a company, going through diligence step of some sort or preparing for that,
Mm-hmm.
is it do you take what companies say and founders say and their teams at face value, or do you how
Yeah.
do you figure that out?
So we when we're prepping a company for sale or prepping a company for investment, you know, we're kind of like your doctor or your lawyer. You got to be honest with us, right? And if you're honest with us, then we can help, right? If you've got a positioning problem, we can help address it, right? You can you can hit it up front, and there's workarounds, but we've got to really understand, and you really need to take an honest look at your business. Now, Marilyn, to your question, we listen to our clients, and we listen to what the founders have to say, but we also, because we work in the space, we have a pretty good sense for, other solutions that are out there that may be really strong. And so, when you're competing against a strong solution, and we're coming up with a competitive grid, which is one of the things that we would do in our materials for investors or buyers, we'd dig real in. Why are so we use these Harvey balls, right? So a full Harvey ball is a 5, and no, nothing is a 1, right? You've given yourself a 4 here, and your competitor a 1. Why is that, right? And so we're not doing anybody any good by just taking what they tell us and not pressure testing it, because the buyers are going to pressure test it, the investors are going to pressure test it. It's our job to get you ready for that, right? And so thinking about that in advance, having battle cards, right, is another good example of something that you can do. This is why we won this particular contest. This is who we competed against. It's all really important.
Great insight, great advice there. All right. As we move to commandment number 4. All right.
Right. Commandment number 4, knowest thy market opportunity. This is really about understanding your TAM. And TAM is total addressable market, right? And what we typically see from emerging growth companies is they'll say the HR tech market is a $2 billion market, and if we can just get 1% of that, then we're a $200 million company or whatever, right? The way that you really need to think about your TAM. So your TAM, the reason that that's important, maybe I'll step back for a second. The reason TAM is important because TAM will give you a sense, or will give buyers or investors a sense of how big this company can be, right? It's in a competitive market, there will always be competitors, right? And so a good rule of thumb is that no one will ever really own more than 20% of a market, right? So if you've got if you got a really do have a $2 billion TAM, this can be a $200 million company, right? So that is, it's a sort of a cross-reference type thing to, you're projecting in your model that you're going to be a $100 million company, say, and if your TAM is only really $50 million, well, there's no way, right? You can't be bigger than your TAM. And so really understanding it and understanding why it's important is important. And so we look at TAM top down and bottom up, right? So the top down is when, Gartner will talk about your particular space, and it's pretty well defined, and your TAM is X dollars. Okay. So that's the top down. Bottom up is an exercise that we encourage everybody to do. And a bottom up TAM is calculated by saying, okay, what is your ideal customer profile? How many of them are there? Are you charging them? Right? That, when it's based on number of customers, what you're going to charge them, how many there are, and what they look like, then that is it's math, right? And if there's enough potential customers out there, and you're charging enough, then that becomes really compelling, because that's the type of deep analysis and deep thought that buyers and investors are looking for. And I know, Marilyn, you've got thoughts on TAM as well.
Yeah, it's funny, a whole bunch of thoughts on it, but where we see founders get into trouble is, they've done it, their investor deck, and they're in motions, or they've, gone through some thresholds, and that their sales motions are selling to the whole addressable market. And it's so intoxicatingly interesting, and there's a lot of variability in the sales cycle, which makes it, in my past book of mistakes, that makes it really hard to sell. And so what we try to do is figure out, of the total addressable market, what are the sub-segments for whom they've got hair on fire, burning need now to fix those problems that our clients are uniquely capable of addressing, and to figure that out, because otherwise they're just, everything.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned that hair on fire problems. I mean, that's one of the things that we look for in a in a potential client, right? Do you address a top 3 pain point for a particular client segment? And if you do, right, you become a need to have versus a nice to have. And being a need to have is super important to creating value.
Right.
And we're getting a little bit off track, but I think this is an important topic in today's market in HR tech, right? What are needs? What is a need to have versus what is a nice to have, right? Well, core HR is kind of a need to have. Engagement was a need to have when the job market was super tight. It still may be, because you're dealing with remote work and things like that, but understanding whether or not you're a need to have or a nice to have at any particular time is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And how to have that conversation. And that gets into the Simon Sinek, what's your why?
Right.
It's easy to see the ones that have defined that and done the work, but getting there wasn't simple. Right. And then just in the interest of kind of riffing, what happens when you're dealing with a point solution that probably never will materialize in, call it a full-on standalone future $200 million company, but they solve an extremely specific problem that is an inch wide and a mile deep, and probably a candidate for more of an asset sale.
Yeah. So that's the question that we ask with regards to that is, are you a product or are you a company? Right. So do are you a solution or are you a product? If it's a product, there's still markets for products, right? Your buyer universe probably shrinks pretty significantly if the use case is very specific. And we tend to, but it happens, right? It's, hey, I've developed this really unique solution. It's never going to expand. The addressable market for it is $20 million or $50 million or whatever, right? Which would be a small TAM. But if it serves an important purpose, then it's helpful to understand that. And when you position a company, what we don't do is position you. We try to avoid making you out to be something that you aren't. So if it's a product and not a company, we'll talk about, this is why the product is really important, and this is what the need is, and this is this is why people should be interested in acquiring it, right? We're not gonna make you out to be something that you're not, but we will make sure that we highlight every single thing that's really awesome about your product and why somebody should be interested in it.
It's a different motion.
Different, a little bit of same motion, but a little bit of a different angle.
Okay. Different outfit.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
instead of a little black dress, it's maybe a little red dress.
That's right.
All right. Speaking of red dresses,
All right.
right?
So
What is this?
Commandment number 5: preparest thee for the Inquisition. So, when you should expect that when you are ready to sell, that you will have a forensic exam of your business like you have never experienced before. And the companies that do best are the ones that are prepared for this. So they manage the P&L with a view that buyers are going to be taking a very deep dive, right? So, think about where you're spending money. Think about what your P&L looks like, right? So if you're on, here's a really good example. We had a business that we took to market where they had a outside controller, and they were on QuickBooks, and they showed revenue and cost of sales was 0, so gross margin was 100%. And that's right, nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition word. So gross margin was 100%. Their P&L line, their G&A was comp and other, right? And so when we talk about this commandment, it's building your P&L with the expectation that people are going to go through it, right? And using best practices to understand what is a buyer going to expect to see. They're going to look at how much you're spending on R&D, for instance, and say, okay, well, are they spending 20% of revenue on R&D? That feels right. If it's 10%, are they not investing enough in R&D, right? So think about, by understanding what a buyer is going to be looking for, you can build your P&L such that it'll provide good information, and you won't lose momentum when you're talking to buyers. Another thing, clean up balance sheet items. So, had another client, they had a houseboat, and the houseboat was on the balance sheet. Well, houseboat isn't really part of this particular deal. Let's figure out a way to get the houseboat off the balance sheet. And Super Bowl tickets and country club memberships and things like that, right? If you're an individual founder and a bootstrap business, you can run all that stuff through your business, but you want to try and clean it up as much as possible. I think that's it. I mean, just be ready for the deep dive.
Do you see issues with RevRec come up?
Yes. Yeah, actually, that's a really good question. So we had a client who conflated billings with revenue. And so
Right.
and billings are not revenue. I think a good advice here is to get a really good, if you don't have a good CFO, there are outsourced CFO organizations. Marilyn, you work with one, I work with one, who can help, give you sale ready or investor ready presentations that'll withstand a quality of earnings, or even a quality of revenue. But yeah, we do see a lot of problems with RevRec, that one in particular. So yeah, billings are not revenue.
Right.
That's when you recognize, right? It's like, when are you recognizing it, right? What are your policies around RevRec? You're going to get these questions, and they need to be consistent with GAAP or need to be consistent with industry standards.
Right. I mean,
hang on, Jonathan's got a question.
Oh, Jonathan.
Isn't it best to just get a fractional CFO, and especially SaaS-based? Yeah, that's actually what Marilyn and I are suggesting. Is she's got a group that does fractional CFO work. I've got a group that does fractional CFO work. The answer is absolutely right. Get somebody, and not only for the financial side, but they're also going to understand the metrics that that buyers and investors are going to be looking for, right? They're going to, we took a SaaS company in the market. They'd never heard of what net revenue retention was. And so we took all their data, all their, customer by month data for the last 3 years and calculated net revenue retention. It's like, holy cow, your net revenue retention is 130%. And it has been for the last 3 years. Understanding that, right? And they had no idea because they, this was a bootstrap founder who didn't know what they were supposed to be tracking. A good fractional CFO who understands SaaS, if you are a SaaS company, will identify those and help you understand what to track and help you understand why that's important and how to, and oh, by the way, I mean, these metrics are important not just because investors and buyers are interested in them. They're also important. And the reason that they're important is because they can help you manage your business, right? If your net revenue retention is below 100%, that means that your existing customer base isn't growing. Why is that, right? If your logo retention is 80%, why are you losing customers, right? If you're looking at it through the numbers, it can help you identify problems before they become big problems so that you can address them.
Yeah, I mean, getting the fractional expertise in this is just, you don't have to have a full-time CFO in order to get the benefit of that advice. And really, it's like knowing your numbers and all of the benchmarking that goes along with this. In my first personal round of due diligence, we were running cash-based on QuickBooks. And it took, I would say, and we were probably at about, 10 million in revenue at the time. And it took probably a good year to clean that up and then just set, that making that transition. So set up your businesses using accrual accounting to start,
Actually, Marilyn, you raised one really important point. And this I actually see a lot. You mentioned understanding your numbers and being able to talk to your numbers. What you don't want to do, you really want to understand your numbers at depth. Buyers and investors will expect you to understand your numbers at depth. When they have a question, they expect it to be answered very quickly. If it's something that you got to pull together, then pull it, say, this will take me a day or two and I'll send it to you, right? But don't stumble over your numbers. If you stumble over your numbers, you exude a lack of confidence. If you have a lack of confidence in your numbers, they have a lack of confidence in you. Understand your numbers. I think that may be another commandment. I might be jumping the gun.
All right. Seems like we need a whole session on this as a future. Yeah. All right. All right. Explain the reference.
All right. Here. The next one, project wisely and you will rule the world. So, this is all about creating a forward financial forecast, right? So we recommend, you don't need a 10-year model. You don't even really necessarily need a 5-year model, but you do need a pretty good 3-year model, right? And it really needs to be assumption-based and tight, right? You need to be able to articulate rational assumptions that are based in fact, because this is where investors and buyers are really going to dig in. Right. My boss, Charles, always has he has a phrase or he has a question. So, why should I believe this versus 50% of this? Right. And they'll do things like, buyers will do things like, okay, you're projecting that revenue is going to grow by $2 million in 2024. What does your backlog look like in your pipeline? What's your coverage model? Meaning, do I have $10 million in my pipeline and I'm projecting $2 million in revenue? So that's a 5-to-1 coverage model. Okay, that makes sense. If your pipeline's $2 million and you're projecting $2 million in revenue growth, it's not, you're not going to get everything in your pipeline. So where's that going to come from, right? So they're going to do this type of analysis. How productive are your salespeople? Well, if I've got salespeople and they're only generating, $100,000 a year, and I'm projecting, I've got 3 of them, and I'm projecting $1 million in growth, how's that work? Right? So they're going to look for disconnects between the underlying assumptions, which are things like pipeline and backlog and number of salespeople and things like that, and compare that to your forward projection model and see if it's rational, right? If you've got rational assumptions for everything, this is how I'm scaling my sales team. These are my costs related to product development, right? If it's all rational and well thought out on a line item basis, then you're going to get very high marks from a potential investor or potential acquirer because you know your numbers, you've got a rational model, and it's very difficult to poke holes in. One of the things that we do with our new clients is we will be very tough on your financial model. We will take the role of a venture capitalist or a private equity guy or a corp dev guy and poke holes in your model. And when it stands up to us, then when you're ready to go. But I think that's super, super important.
But what size of organization, of company, do you see this maturity start to really happen typically? Is it at the 3 million mark? Is it at a 1 million mark?
Yeah,
when did you see that happening?
It's really so the maturity level and the sophistication level really starts, I think, above 3 million. And now at 3 million, you're still growing. You're still building your sales team. 5 million, from our perspective, our ICP, right? You all have an ICP. I've got an ICP too. Our ICP is companies that have $5 million in ARR trailing, because when we think about, I mean, you guys know this, you live this every day. It's really freaking hard to get to $1 million in revenue, right? Harder than that is to get to 3. And harder than that is to get to 5, right? Each of these are very, they're very difficult things to do. And when you've done that, when you've gotten to 3 million in revenue, you've accomplished quite a bit. We've gotten to $5 million in revenue, you've accomplished quite a bit. So, so that's where, so again, where do you start to see that sophistication? Really above 3. And when you're above 3, you're really starting to gain traction. And I think our view is you're really starting to gain traction in the marketplace. When you're above 5, you've got a proven solution that's starting to show some scale.
That's really helpful. Really helpful. All right. Explain this one. What is this guy doing? Is this Will Ferrell?
Love thy funnel, for it giveth momentum. Yes, Jonathan, you can just skip to 5 million. So this is the and I mentioned this previously, the funnel is the basis for your financial model, right? If you have, so the way that we like to, one of the things that we'll do with our companies is we want you to track your funnel. First of all, we want you to have, it's important to track it, right? And it's important to have a really well thought out stage gate system, right? When are you moving to the various different stages? What are the probabilities associated with that? So that's really important. We also want to see, so we want to see funnel at a point in time and compare that. What's the coverage model related to your projections, right? So I talked about coverage model before. The other thing that's important is to understand how your funnel is growing over time. If your Q3 2023 funnel is at $10 million and your Q2 or Q2 was something less than that, or a year ago was something less than that, the funnel is it provides evidence of growth in your business that may not yet be apparent in your revenue, right? So if I can show that my funnel has doubled over a period of time, but my revenue over that period of time has been flat, and I'm projecting a pretty big bump up next year, if I've got good funnel coverage and I can show that my funnel has grown, then I may get credit for that revenue growth in that forward revenue growth, even though I haven't shown it yet. Funnel's super important.
Then there's the quality element too, right? I mean, just, not just picking up anything and putting it in there.
So funnel management is super important. right? And that salespeople tend to be very optimistic.
Really?
Salespeople tend to be very optimistic. And
It's not a,
so,
it's not a
yeah,
glass
so
of
you're
water,
really,
it's a whole ocean.
that's
Right.
right. So there needs to be good scrutiny when it comes to your funnel, right?
Mhm.
And good, and just good practice, right? And so scrutinize the funnel, scrutinize the when something is bubbling up. First of all, have actual rules and policies in place for when something comes into the funnel, when something moves to the next stage, right? If you could say, yeah, these were the three requirements, check, 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 it moves. So yeah, funnel management is super important. If your funnel's garbage, then you're not going to get credit for anything.
Curiosity, because historically in the past, there's been like this really hard line between, call it, demand generation and marketing, and then what happens in sales. And in the past, I had HubSpot and Salesforce, and it was really clear, when we went from one side to the other. Now we're running everything from HubSpot, and a lot of people are. And it's a bit blurry, if you would. Do you look at the top of the top of the funnel in terms of demand generation before it actually hits your sales funnel? Do you look at the quality of what's happening there?
Yeah, no, we do, and buyers will as well. I mean, so most of our focus,
Mhm.
to be quite honest with you, is near term opportunities, right? What's at the
Okay.
bottom of your funnel?
All right.
Oh, wait, that, and we look at that because that's important to your next quarter's, not the next, your numbers the next quarter, your numbers the next year, right? So that's why we pay most attention to that. But if your demand gen is growing like that, and you've shown historically that you can convert at X percentage, right? And you've got the data to show that, again, track this stuff, right? Track it over time. And you've got the data to show that, then people will be like, okay, you're not normally going to get credit for the top of funnel, but if you can show this momentum, then it will give you credibility when you try and explain to them why we're going to grow 50% next year.
Really good stuff. All right, this next one is probably my favorite one.
All right. So the commandment number 8 is shine thy light. And what we're talking about here is be market visible, right? The buyers should know who you are. Your competitors should know who you are. Um, uh, be out there, right? So to do that, you develop a strong PR program. You develop partnerships. You work with folks who, Workday is a really good example. Workday buys a lot of their partners, right? So if you can establish, and we call this a Trojan horse strategy, the idea is become a partner with your most logical buyer, right? And if you do that and you become super valuable to them, then they'll want to take you out before before someone else can rip out what has become a valuable component of their go-to-market, right? This partnership. So get out there, be visible, let people know who you are.
So where does the analyst and the influencer motion fall? Is that in here?
Right. Yeah, right in here. Yeah. It's the Gartners of the world, it's the influencers of the world. I will say this. The influence. So I have in my career, I have worked with a lot of I worked in a lot of spaces, and I'm focusing on HR tech. Most of these other spaces don't have the influencers that HR tech does, which is really sort of new to me, at least over the last couple of years, and really pretty cool. But it's part of it, right? It's how are you going to get the word out? Well, Gartner's going to get the word out because you're going to be in a magic quadrant someplace, right? And the influencers are going to be able to get the word out because you're going to go on Chad and Cheese or one of the other things, one of the other podcasts, and they're going to talk about your business, right? So being visible is important.
Right. So we have a thought leadership element that goes into this, which plays right into
Get on panels, right?
Yeah.
Present at HR Tech, get on a panel at HR Tech, right? This is all about visibility.
Get into a virtual collaboration zone.
Yeah, there you go.
Right.
Get into a virtual collaboration zone.
Oh, now we've got a naked man here. What's going on with
Yeah.
this
All
here?
right. So the commandment number 9 is be thou not an island. And what this means is that you need a very strong bench around you, right? A good team, a deep team. What you want to avoid is what we call the CEO show, right? In the CEO show, there's no strong number 2. The CEO is the chief product officer. The CEO is the head of sales, the chief operating officer. And what the implication there is that you, the CEO, become important to the business in an outsized way, meaning that the investor, so the investor is going to want to help build a bench behind you, but really on a sale, they're going to want, what they're going to be terrified of is acquiring your business, giving you a bunch of money, and having you hit the beach, so to speak. And so if you build a strong team, when we go and start to talk to buyers, and if you do plan on exiting the business, right, you want to really, it's optionality. You want to at least have the option to exit the business. What you don't want is for them to structure a deal where they've got 50% of the consideration in earnout over the next 3 years, and you got to stick around in order to get it, right? The way that you avoid that is by having a good, strong team underneath you, a good bench, where you can say, hey, this thing can run itself by, this business runs by itself, and I've got 3 people below me who are solid. My number 2 is this person. They could take over if anything ever happens to me. You don't really need me, right? Now, you may want to go along with that business because maybe you're getting equity and you want to grow it or whatever. But I think you want optionality where if you want to exit, you ought to be able to set yourself up to exit. You do that by having a deep bench.
The bench is both internal, and what about experts?
It's external as well. But a buyer's not buying your advisors, right? They're buying the team, and they're locking the team up with employment agreements and things like that. They're, if somebody is overly important, they'll say, hey, we'll give you X percentage of the consideration in a year as long as this person sticks around. You want to avoid any one person being outsized in terms of importance from a buyer's perspective.
Okay, great advice here.
All right, last one, and this is the most important. Missest thou not thy numbers, lest ye be cast into the fire. There is nothing more important when you're in a process than making your numbers. Making your numbers shows an inherent understanding of your business, right? If you say that you're going to hit $5 million in ARR by the end of the year, you want to hit 5.1. You don't want to hit 6. You certainly don't want to hit 4, right? Nothing will derail a deal faster than missing your numbers. Now, no one's ever perfect. Forecasting is never perfect. There may be a situation where, you've signed a contract. They're supposed to, you're supposed to recognize revenue in December. It slips to January. That kind of stuff happens. So, you need to, if it happens, you need to have a really good rationale for why it happens. But the way that buyers look at their numbers is, again, forecast represents an inherent understanding of the business. Missed numbers instill a lack of confidence, and it will hurt you in a sale. So you may have, the way to think about this is, you may have a forecast that you're showing your investors, have a forecast that you would show the bank, meaning that there is no way that we're going to miss this number. We may,
there's different levels of forecasting, right?
There are different, yeah, exactly.
Right.
So we look at base case, 95% probability, plan case, which might be a 80% probability or 75% probability goal case, which might be 50% probability. Understanding the various levers of that is really important. Hey, if we add $10 million, here are the levers that we pull, and we could, potentially do this. Or if a couple of things go right, we can hit this number. But you generally want to go to market with somewhere in between base and plan case, right? And you really don't want to miss your numbers. I cannot stress this enough. Put a whole lot of thought into what your numbers are. So if I were taking you to market today, right, we would want to have 100% confidence in our 2023. We might be a little bit more aggressive in 2024, provided that it's back-end loaded, because they're going to look at your numbers every single month. Are you hitting your numbers? Are you hitting your numbers? This one is super critical.
You know what?
I can't stress this enough. I can't stress this.
Personal share of what happened, going through the Inquisition. And again, I think I might be getting this wrong a little bit, but we were 10, 11 million. And going through the Inquisition. And what happened with the founders is they took the foot off the gas, right? Oh, we're going to get acquired. And then the motion and momentum and urgency, all of a sudden it just came to, oh, well, it's foregone. We don't have to worry about this anymore. And it's like, wait a second here. Assume that this transaction will not go through.
Yeah.
But literally there was this almost investments weren't being made that should have been made. And the deal didn't happen. Most of them don't when an LOI comes in.
Yeah.
And then we had to start over.
You raise a really good point. We always get this question when you're under LOI, or it's typically when you're under LOI. There's no guarantee that even though you're under LOI, it's going to close. So the question that we get is, should I do this? Hire this person, fire this person, whatever. Or should I not do this? And my answer is always the same, and my answer is with a question. Absent an M&A transition, what would you do? Well, I'd do this, then do that. You always want to operate your business as if an M&A transaction is not going to happen.
Right.
So don't make decisions around a deal because it may not happen. Make decisions around what's in the long-term health of the business. And
so this is bonus.
Well, wait, hang on. There was a question. Is there a standard percentage of transactions that happen under LOI? I don't know. I would say in marketed deals, and actually this is going to relate to the next one. In marketed deals that we're involved in, so we'll go ahead and hit it. Love thy advisor as thyself, right? We're here to help you, right? Your banker, Marilyn. So we're here to help you grow. We're here to help you provide good strategic advice. We're here to add value, right? Involve us, have a good team, involve us. So in a marketed process, I would say that 8 out of 10 deals will close if they get under LOI. And the ones that don't close, wow. It's typically because the selling entity missed their numbers, or something, an economic impact happened, like COVID or whatever, something like that, right? So it's typically something related to that. When you have a deal with a banker, we serve as a very good insurance policy to make sure that deals close. And the reason is because we will vet your buyer. If you get under a letter of intent, we will have vetted them already, and they will know going into the LOI that we would love nothing more than to take this business out to market, because you're getting a really good deal, and I think as a good banker, I can get more. So I am waiting with bated breath to sell this business.
Alan, that's a fantastic place to end. You are out of time, and boy, I wish we had another hour because I bet you could really dig into all those things, and such valuable advice. Thank you so much, Marilyn. Thank you, Alan.